Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today. My name is Rachel Roberts, um, and it's such a treat to be able to do this workshop for you, the salary negotiation workshop. Um, I am the Associate Professor of Music Leadership here at the Eastman School of Music, part of University of Rochester. And today I am thrilled to be able to partner with a number of different departments here at the University of Rochester, including the Greene Center, the Susan B. Anthony Center, the Hajim School of Engineering, and the Simon Business School to bring this workshop to you. This is also supported by the Alumni Relations Department here at the university. Just a couple housekeeping things before we begin. We are recording today's workshop. For those who may not be able to join us, we will be able to post this later for them for review. And if you had not RSVP'd previously, you have not received yet the link to the PDF workbook that we will be working through today. So if you had RSVP'd, you should have received an email yesterday from the Greene Center that has that PDF attached. If you can't find that email, or if you hadn't yet RSVP'd, please go to the Susan B. Anthony website, and I think one of my colleagues will be able to post that for you as well. You'll need to download that PDF, as that is the workbook that we will be working through today. So Catherine or Jody, maybe you could post that in the Q&A for everyone. And if you have questions throughout today's workshop, please feel free to post them in the Q&A. I have colleagues on who will be able to monitor and answer those questions throughout the workshop. And the flow is that I will work through much of the material, and then we aim to have the last half hour of open Q&A for you. What are questions that we didn't cover, or what are questions that you have in the current climate that we all are experiencing right now that may impact some of this learning and the ability that you have to negotiate right now. I think that's all that I have at the moment. I will introduce all of the panelists later, but Julie Bazan is from the Simon School, Catherine Farout is from the Susan B. Anthony Center, Wendi Heinzelman, Dean Heinzelman from the Hajim School of Engineering, and Jodyi Wren from the Greene Center is everyone who is joining today, and they will be monitoring the Q&A and the chat. So for the most part of this workshop, I will transition my screen so that you can see the slides. You will also want to have your workbook pulled up so that we can work through all of this together. And if you give me just a moment while I share my screen, then we will begin. Thank you to those of you who took the poll as well. I'm going to end that first one, and we will have a second one here at the end of the session. Excellent. So I think you should be seeing my screen right now. The slides says AAUW. This workshop is put together by the American Association of University Women. And they have taken a number of initiatives to, there we go, a number of initiatives to be able to understand what's happening and what the current trends are with gender equity and research right now. They also are the ones that put this material together. The University of Rochester is a member of AAUW, and we are proud to be able to offer this to all the students and the entire University of Rochester campus. So today, in hosting this webinar and this topic, we just ask that you be present and engaged. be yourself, be an active listener. And if someone has questions that may pertain to a certain experience or scenario that they may or may not have been in before, we just ask that you respect that confidentiality. And the learning that we have here today is for the betterment of everyone. The flow of our session today is in front of you. There's 4 steps to salary negotiation as AAUW presents it. The first one is, how do you know your value? The second is, how do you identify your target salary and benefits? So we'll get into what a target salary means. The third piece is how to know and develop your own strategy. And then the last piece is practicing. As a musician, obviously, I practice quite a bit. We all have, but it's the same with salary negotiations. You can do all the preparations, but you actually need to practice saying this as well. So we will get into that a little bit later. Before diving right into those steps, we want to take just a moment to share with you some information about the gender pay gap. And this is really addressing the why. The reason AAUW is working to bring these negotiation workshops across the country is because there's a long way to go until the gender pay gap is eliminated. This is an issue that can affect you as early as your first job. So for those of you that may not have negotiated, you are in a really powerful position starting out and beginning your career after college to be able to know this and implement it from the very first position that you will have. We're bringing you these tools because we want you to feel empowered to advocate for your own self in your own career and overcome any pay gap inequities that you may be experiencing. I should say that I came to this material. I'd lived in Boston for 9 years, and it was an initiative of the mayor, Mayor Marty Walsh, to eliminate the gender wage gap throughout the entire city. His goal is to do that by 2030. And when I heard that, I thought, well, that's a good thing. And that same week that I heard about this initiative, I also read an article from the BBC News that's saying at the current rate of change, gender pay inequity will not be realized for another 208 years. And I thought, well, I'm going to be dead by the time that happens. What might I be able to do to move the needle on this a little bit? So I attended one of these workshops. I found the information incredibly valuable, and I trained to become a facilitator. And today, this is the 39th workshop that I will have facilitated, and I've trained just shy of 1,200 individuals how to strategies for negotiating their own salaries. So diving back into the gender pay gap, this is how we describe the inequality between what men and women are paid nationally. So working women who are full-time are paid 82 cents for every dollar earned by a man. And there is more information where all of this comes from on AAUW's website, aauw.org, if you'd like to dig into more of these reports and see the research that they have been doing. If you break this down further by race, the percentages change quite drastically. Asian women are 90 cents to a man's dollar, white women 79, Black or African American women 62 cents, Native Hawaiian or other Pacific Islanders 61 cents, American Indian or Alaska Native 57, and Hispanic or Latina women earn 54 cents for every dollar a man earns. This gender pay gap exists in every line of work, at every educational level, and at various stages throughout the career, beginning, middle, and end. And, you know, these numbers are quite shocking. Women of color are very disproportionately affected by the pay gap. But if you put this into real numbers, this is the reason why I keep advocating and leading these workshops. These lost wages mean that women and their families have less money to support themselves, to save and invest for the future, to pay down their debt, to spend on goods and services. Women overall lose just over $400,000 over the course of their 40-year working career when compared with a man. Black women lose just shy of $1 million, $946,000 over the course of their 40-year career. And Latinas lose over $1.1 million over the course of their 40-year career when compared with a white man. This data is reported by the National Women's Law Center, and they use a formula to estimate these losses over a 40-year career. But this is not just a woman's issue. This is an economic issue as well. If the pay gap were to close tomorrow, 2.5 million children would be lifted out of poverty in the US. So regardless of salary negotiation strategies, I think it's important to begin with an understanding of the inequities that currently exist. And this is why the Salary Negotiation Initiative is one of the biggest ones that AAUW has going on right now. Some of the causes of the gender pay gap are that women are paid less for the same work, they are overrepresented in low-wage jobs and underrepresented in the high-wage ones. And women are often well represented in undervalued fields such as healthcare, education, public administration. If you've been reading any of the impacts, the economic impacts of COVID-19 and what's going on, you'll not have to look too hard to find headlines only exacerbating this point, saying that women are getting hit economically harder than men right now with navigating COVID-19. And another cause is that women are discriminated against and face barriers that result in lower pay because they are often caregivers. And on top of all of this, there is a huge stereotype and a double bind, which means, the double bind represents the conflicting demands that women receive around behavior expectations, especially at work. Women often are posed with two choices: to be seen as competent or to be liked. And likable women are sometimes seen as incompetent and may not be given stretch assignments. When women step outside of cultural expectations and are assertive or advocate for themselves, they may be seen as unlikable. Both of these, the stereotypes and the double bind, can make negotiations more difficult for women, and you often need to be seen as competent and liked in order to get what you want, which is something that history has shown is impossible for women to do. Because we are on a webinar, we can't quite connect in with everyone to hear why you signed up today, but I would be curious if you wanted to type in the Q&A session right now, what do you see as your biggest challenge in negotiating your salary and benefits? So if you take a moment and just type that into the Q&A, what do you feel is your biggest challenge? Asking for a higher salary, that's a great one. Great. Not sure what you can ask for, especially during COVID-19. Yeah, that's very true. And the awareness of an organization's financial challenges. I think that's a very real factor. I have come from the nonprofit background, and nonprofits don't have a standard compensation range, often due to the financial challenges that they have. Proving worth with your salary or raise. Asking for a higher salary might make me look greedy. Yes, I have felt this as well. All of these are really great questions. Thank you for typing them in. And one more, how to put value on my skills and my educational achievements. Fantastic. Well, I hope we will be able to address some of these in this session today. Estimating what pay range I qualify for and what I fall in. And my biggest challenge would probably be when I graduate and start my first job. I'm not sure how I can start negotiating as a new graduate. These are all excellent questions. We will hopefully cover most of these today, especially there's two types of workshops that AAUW offers. One is called Work Smart. It's for working individuals. The other is called Start Smart, which is the one that I'm presenting today. It's geared mostly for college students in that transition from college to professional career, that very first time that you are negotiating and preparing your strategies for that first job offer. So that's the workshop that we are in today. Hopefully, we will be able to answer most of these questions, as well as have a very fruitful dialogue with all of you at the end. And I see one other question here. First and foremost, is this webinar for women only? No, absolutely not. This webinar is for everyone. We just start with a little bit of advocacy and raising awareness as to what the gender wage gap is. The information that's shared in this webinar absolutely is beneficial for everyone, whether it's you as an employee or you being an employer at some point as well, and how you think about pay equity and transparency with those that you work with and work for. So I'm hopeful that everyone will find value in this. Thank you for asking that question. And again, if you have other questions along the way, please don't hesitate to type in. And I just want to say one more time, for those of you that may have joined in the last couple minutes, you should see in the chat the link to the workbook as to where this can be downloaded. Jodyi Wren had posted it earlier, and if you didn't receive it in your email, please go download this PDF at the website, because this is what we will be working through together over this next hour. So as we dive in, step one in negotiation is knowing your value. The first step in preparing is to, how do you confidently and articulate, share the value that you bring and the contribution that you will make to your position in a way that resonates with an employer. This seems intuitive, but for many, this section requires some behavior changes. For many of us, we are not comfortable talking about our own accomplishments. I absolutely fall into that category. For some, there may even be cultural norms and how you were raised that make this much more difficult. So we are going to share the tools to help you all speak more confidently about your work. Great. Jodyi, if you're chiming in, could you post that link again? Someone did chime in late and is not able to see the chat since it was there prior to them joining. Thank you. Okay. One of the pieces to begin in sharing your value with an employer, you often think of your resume, but I would argue, and AAUW puts out, that it's beyond the resume as to how you share the value that you will and can offer an organization. And you do so by creating value statements. If you have that workbook in front of you, let's take a look at a resume on page 6 and page 7. I'm giving you just a second to get there. And today in this workbook, we will be using the resume of Olivia Taylor. She is our fictitious job seeker that we will be following through the workshop. I want you to take a moment and look for accomplishments or skills or work experiences on Olivia's resume. Again, though we don't have the chat, I would ask you to type in the Q&A again. What would you articulate about Olivia's experience? What stands out to you? So again, we are reviewing Olivia Taylor's resume. I believe it's on page 6 in your workbook. What stands out to you? Type it in the Q&A, and I'm happy to bring that up. So one contributor said the formatting, her leadership info is listed last on the resume. Seems she has a lot of personal skills. Fantastic. The leadership information, I want to go back to this point. The leadership information that's listed last on the resume, I appreciate reading that on Olivia's materials because it didn't necessarily fit in to any of the other positions, but she felt it was relevant to explaining who she is and what she would have to offer. If you have volunteer experience or other leadership information that you feel is relevant to applying for a posting, I would encourage you to think creatively about how you might include that on a resume as well, just like Olivia did here. Lots of personal skills that she has, yes. You might also notice that the resume begins most every line with action words. She's putting herself in a position of doing something, of being active, and of taking initiative. Someone else just wrote in, thank you, 18 months of experience as a staff writer, which is directly relevant to the job she is applying for. Yes, absolutely. And I appreciate that you called out 18 months of experience because what's also interesting on this resume is a trend that is starting to change as people put resumes together. It's not necessarily listing the date like January 2016 through July of 2018, but instead it's putting the time frame, how many years and how many months. This, by putting it just in the years and the months that you have worked at an organization, goes to help transparency and equity so that if there are gaps in your employment, whether it's due to your own personal circumstance, your own choice, something that isn't your choice, articulating it in that way helps to just show the employer, here are the length of time that I have worked and the skill sets that I have earned. It goes towards normalizing and making opportunities more equitable and eliminating any real or perceived judgment that someone may have in reviewing a resume. So now, if some of you probably have flipped over to page 7, which I believe is where the job posting is. I'm not able to look at the workbook right now. Sorry about that. But using the job posting on, I believe it's page 7, I would love, again, type in the Q&A. Can you point out areas where Olivia's experiences align with the job posting? It is page 7. Okay, thank you. So in comparing Olivia's resume with the job posting, and comparing Olivia's resume with the job posting, where are areas that you see that her experiences align with what is being asked? Right, so the bachelor's degree in marketing, public relations, a related discipline, yes, that directly translates over to the role that she is looking for. Yep, her bachelor's degree and her writing, excellent. Yep, communication skills across the board. You know, I'd say other pieces of this would be her knowledge of social media, right? That's one of the things that's expected, and she has demonstrated that. Um, her years of experience overseeing client relations. And even though she hasn't had direct work experience in sports, go back to that leadership part that she put at the end of her resume. She has a familiarity with sports, and this new position is working in that field. So not only did Olivia highlight the leadership experience that she had, that leadership experience directly translates over into the new position that she is asking for. Great. And I did see one other question pop up here. I apologize if I wasn't clear about how only listing months and dates on a resume makes things more equitable. Um, there may be times, either real or perceived, where an employer looks at a resume and sees a 4-year gap in employment. They may question the reasons of what and why that is, and maybe have a slightly more biased receptivity to reading that resume. And if you eliminate those dates, those hard dates, but instead just put the months and years, like 4 months and 3 years that you've worked there, that eliminates showing any gaps that you have in your employment. I'm sorry, I'm reading another chat thing that's going on. But to eliminate showing and calling out that gap in employment instead only helps you to promote and to highlight the experiences that you have and the experience that you have, regardless of whether it is sequential or you've had a gap in your employment. The skills and qualifications that you have today are the same and will carry forward with you even if you quit the workforce for 2 years, right? So it's just a way to make those standards a little bit more equitable and eliminate bias. Excellent. Okay, so moving on. You are your own brand. We hear this a lot, especially in the especially in the era of social media and influencers. We're not going to dig into personal branding today, but we put this up just to remind you that you are your own best advocate. No one knows your impact in your work as well as you do. And when you're on the job market, you sell something that is unique, you. This includes your identity, combination of work experience, work ethic, your interests, your goals, your personality, and your education. So if you take a moment and ask yourself, what differentiates you? How do you bring value to your company or to your organization? And what skills, accomplishments, or work experiences will demonstrate value or the contributions that you will make in the position that you are seeking? Now, when I first attended this workshop, I attended with a friend of mine. And when I was posed these questions, I had a hard time answering. I didn't know where to start or where to begin. And my friend said, Rachel, this is what I see in you. This is some of the work that you have done and have contributed. And then I was able to do the same for her. So you have this workbook with you. We will work through some of it, but if you are stuck on answering some of these questions, feel free to call a friend or a colleague that you trust and get their perspective as well. I'd like to go through this exercise together. In a notebook or a sheet of paper or an open Word document that you have on your computer right now, I'm going to give you 2 minutes and write down as many accomplishments or contributions and skills, things that you are proud of. Just stream of consciousness, what comes to your mind right now, and I'm going to give you 2 minutes to do this. Okay, just a 30-second warming. Keep typing down as many things as you can think of right now. Okay. So again, we have a finite period of time today. I can imagine all of you still typing and clicking at your keyboard and writing down a lot more things that you have done, which is fantastic. Come back to that later. But for time purposes right now, we're going to move on. I want you to select one of those things that you just wrote about. Take one thing that you wrote down and now ask yourself these questions. What did you do to make it happen? What role did you play? What were some of those positive results that came from this? And how can you quantify it? So I'm going to give you about 90 seconds to answer these questions just for one of those things that you wrote down. About 30 more seconds. Okay, fantastic. Now, as you begin to articulate your value, I hope you see what's happening here. One is that you make a list of all of these things that you are proud of, what you've accomplished, what you have to contribute. And then you take each one individually and break it down to think of what did you do to make it happen, right? And you input it into a sentence like this. If you don't know where to begin, use this as a sample. You don't always need to keep coming back to it, but this is a great place to begin. A value statement is how you share your skills and accomplishments in an objective, data-driven way. And it should be tailored to the job that you are seeking. So, example, here, an example of a statement for WorkSmart. I developed a training program for new hires using project management and leadership experience that benefited our company by decreasing turnover by 32%, improving office culture, and saving the company an average of $22,000 a year on onboarding costs. So in that statement, you talk about what you accomplished. That's the very first thing in broadest terms. And then what you used to do it, and then how it benefited the company. So in that statement, it not only had a percentage of decreasing turnover, but it also quantified the hard financial savings as well. Now, as a student, especially with limited work experience, you may not have as significant of financial costs to include in there, but I would still say that there are things that you will have done as a student that can relate to money, definitely relates to numbers and to students and to participation or impact. So when you think about articulating your value, you think about, I accomplished what by using what skills, which benefited our company by these results. On your own time after this workshop, maybe with a friend or a colleague or a family member, I would encourage you to sit down and to do this for all of those pieces of accomplishments that you wrote down. Not only will writing all of those down help better inform you for how to structure your resume, it will help you be prepared to have the language when you are talking both in an interview and in a negotiation, to have the confidence to speak with clarity about the value that you bring to an organization. And remember, if you are your own brand, you are your own best advocate as well. A couple tips here that I wish I would have heeded earlier on in my career. One is to document your accomplishments. I really had not done this in any streamlined or structured way before. And in jobs, you typically have yearly performance reviews, and I would have to do a self-assessment, and I'd go back through my calendar and my emails, and it'd be this huge mammoth thing to try to recreate what I had done the past year. And I skipped over a lot of really small things that actually contributed in a big way. When I was hired for this job at Eastman, someone said, you know, you're going to have to put together a faculty activity report. And if I were you, I would put a Word document on your desktop, and every day or every week, whenever you do something, even if it's small, just put it in there. It'll make putting your faculty activity report together a heck of a lot easier. And I am so glad I listened to them and took their advice, because putting the faculty activity reports together is kind of like a self-assessment of what you accomplished that year. And at least it was a lot of work to do, but at least it was a really thorough place to begin. And there were some things that were on there that I probably would have skipped over had I not documented them throughout the weeks and the months that I worked. I would encourage you, especially starting out in a new position, Document all the different ways that you contribute, both in your job description and above and beyond your job description. And have that document, whether it's on your desktop, whether it's in a journal, have some place that you go to where you continue to document all of those things. So when you build your case for either negotiating a raise or a promotion or a new position, you have it ready. And this next one, thinking beyond the task. You know, yes, there's something to actually getting that work done, but it goes beyond just getting that work done. I would say a parallel could be thinking of yourself as a student. You know, you have so many assignments that you have to get done to get the degree and to be completed in that course, that particular course. But if you look beyond that course, you're looking towards putting a degree together, and that degree will afford you the opportunity for a hopefully very fruitful and enjoyable career. So it's kind of that same parallel. Yes, you have what's in front of you, but what is the broader impact and lens that you are looking through everything with? Quantify your work, bring data to the conversation whenever and wherever you can. You know, this is one that challenges me, but the more I've sat with it and thought about it, I really believe most everything can be quantified. You know, you are able to have data, whether it's numbers of stats or impact or positions reached. If you're having difficulty thinking of how you may bring data into your own conversations as you assess your skills and contributions, talk with someone and have a sounding board. If you can't find anyone, email me. My email address is on the Eastman website. I'd be more than happy to talk with you. But try to quantify the work and bring data in to show those metrics of what you have accomplished. That substantiates and puts hard facts around what it is that you have to offer an organization. And last but certainly not least is everything counts. There's study after study that show women tend to take on more things like event planning and side projects around the office. And all of this counts because that impacts the time that you have to spend on anything else. There's only 168 hours in every week. And how do you choose to use those, or how are you asked to use those? It's important to document all of this. So if anyone has any questions, feel free to type them into the Q&A. I'll give us about 30 seconds to do that before we go on to step number 2. Okay, great. I don't see any questions popping up at the moment, but if they are, we will answer them. I'll try to catch them and go back, or my colleagues who are also on the webinar will answer them. Please don't hesitate to type them in at any time. Step number 2 in negotiation is knowing your target salary and benefits. Almost all employers set salary ranges for their jobs, which means that all jobs have a quote unquote worth on the market. It doesn't matter how much you earned at your first job, and it doesn't matter what your last salary was. Your market value is what an employer is likely to pay you in that particular position. So this is what we are going to be diving into in step 2. Are these 6 steps to benchmarking your salary and benefits. And this is all outlined in the workbook that you have in front of you as well. Diving in, setting your targets. It's important to review, as we launch into this, review a couple definitions with you first so we all have clarity as to what we mean by targets. So your target salary is your worth based on objective market wage data. And in an ideal world, all market wage data would be available. But as I mentioned before, I've worked in nonprofits, and that data may not be available, and it may vary widely from organization to organization. But when you look at target salaries, the definition of a target salary is your worth based on objective market wage data. The target salary range is the range that you use to negotiate with an employer. If you are aiming for a position that you're hoping you will earn $45,000, you don't want to start negotiating at $45,000, right? You will want to aim higher than that so that both you will come down a little, the employer will go up, and hopefully you will meet at that target salary of $45,000, right? So we'll talk about how to determine that range. And the other target that is important to recognize is what's your walk-away point. This is the lowest salary that you are willing to accept and still reach an agreement. And it's also a tool to prevent you from accepting a salary that you may regret later on. And we'll get into a little bit of this more, but in a couple slides, but I'll say right now, there is no wrong answer here. And sometimes you need to accept a job just to have a job and have some money coming in. So the answer as to what the walk-away point is it depends. It depends on your situation and what's happening right now. But these are the three targets that we will be talking about. For the purposes of this workshop, AAUW uses salary.com when they research and find comparable salaries that are aligned to job titles. I would encourage all of you to use multiple sources for your research. Don't just go to salary.com, but try to find sources that are employer-reported data instead of individually reported data. Salary.com uses employer-reported data, which includes everything, salary and benefits. Other websites like Glassdoor.com, that's individually reported data. So while it may give you a benchmark, it may not be the exact numbers that the organization is looking for. LinkedIn is also a resource. If you know anyone at the company that you are seeking or seeking a job in, or anyone in your industry, asking them for guidance on salary is also a great way to collect data. Some cities and some states are passing legislation to allow for more pay transparency in the workplace, which is also a great thing. And I would encourage you to also use the career centers. Go to the Greene Center, go to your specific school, whether it's at Simon or Eastman or Hajim. Go to your school as well and their career centers to get guidance as to benchmarking different salaries. And I did say that LinkedIn is an individually data-driven. It's not always employer-reported. It definitely is a source that you could look at, but in doing your research, it's important to look at multiple different pieces to try to put a picture together. In using salary.com, this is a screenshot of what the web page is like. You'll type in the job title or keyword, and you will type in the location, because as we all know, cost of living is different based on your location in this country or in the world. It's important to put your location in as well. And then you click go. What comes up, going back to Olivia's position description, which we are using her as an example again. This is what comes up, Public Relations Specialist 1. And if you take a quick skim through this, I believe it's in your workbook as well. It pretty much maps over to what Olivia is being asked to do. So then you click go, and this example is also from salary.com. This is an example of what you see on their website. And let me explain what you are looking at. Some companies choose to lead in their compensation and salary, which I don't know if you can see my mouse, but this is the lead up here. Some companies match, so they're right in the middle. They hover right over this bell curve. And some companies choose to lag in their compensation levels. Now, the bell curve that you're seeing is not the average, but rather it's everyone who is working in Washington, D.C. In this public relations specialist 1 job. So the top of that bell curve is not the average, but instead it's the very middle person in what that individual is making. So if you consider that middle person the 50th percentile on average, they are making just over $49,000 for this position. And over here in the 75th percentile with more skills and experience for this public relations specialist 1, you'll find someone earning just over $58,000. And then over here in the newest level of entry and experience, earning $44,500. Okay. I realized there was one point that I forgot to mention. Let me back up right here. For those that are in nonprofit organizations, salary.com is more of one in the for-profit and corporate sector. While I don't live in Boston anymore, I lived there for 9 years, and there was an organization called Third Sector New England, and they were trying to put together salary wage data that is comparable for the third sector or the nonprofit sector, similar to what salary.com is doing for everyone else. So if you are in that nonprofit space, I would encourage you to Google Third Sector New England salary comparison data, and you'll have to take into consideration cost of living, but that is one resource that I know of, in addition to calling on friends, colleagues, and other companies and organizations. I just had to throw that in if there's any others in the nonprofit out there. Okay, so we're back to Olivia, looking at this public relations specialist 1. And now what we want to do is to set a target salary and set a target salary range. So when setting a target salary, remember that's what you would hope to take home, to walk away with. And so for Olivia, that's what she would hope to take home and walk away with. The target salary range is where she begins her negotiation. If you are reaching for a position slightly above your level, you don't want to undervalue yourself to be a competitive candidate. I would encourage you to use this information here to both inform and empower you to ask for what you are worth. And in identifying a target salary range, you can stretch upwards of 20%. So if you take your target salary and stretch up to 20%. AAUW studies have shown that that range is anywhere from 10 to 20% in setting your target salary range. When you share your desired salary in a negotiation, studies suggest that you will be more successful if you put your target salary at the bottom of the range instead of asking for it outright. Giving a range suggests that you are more cooperative and flexible. Okay, so the next step here in this workshop is to look at where Olivia might fall in her target salary range. A smaller range might be more appropriate if you are entry or mid-level in your career. AAUW does not recommend exceeding that 20%. For example, if your target job is $50,000, you can set your range to be $50,000 to $60,000. Now, if you are seeking a salary closer to the 75th percentile, don't let this information discourage you. Use your value statement and build a case for what differentiates you and why you deserve this higher range. So if you go back to Olivia, what they are suggesting here is that given her skills and experience in education, that she falls slightly above this median, right? So just probably $49,500 is what they are looking to recommend that she take home for this position that she's applying for. Now, when she begins her negotiation, she won't want to start there at all. But instead, you would start over here. This is probably closer to $56,000 or $57,000. It's important to note that when you are looking for setting that target salary range, don't base it on a dollar figure, but instead base it on a percentage of what you are asking. Because this may be the entry salary that you are looking for in the first time that you negotiate, but if you factor in only asking $10,000 every time, when you advance in your career and potentially are looking at a job that offers $120,000, stretching up to $130,000 is not as equitable as Olivia stretching up to $58,000 here, right? Okay, so if this is Olivia's target right here, just over $49,000, and this is her range where she will negotiate, setting this top and working back here, the other piece to keep in mind is the walkaway point. This identifying a walkaway point prevents you from accepting an offer that you may later regret. Your walkaway point can be informed by your budget and by your personal situation. Your walkaway point should not be much lower than your target salary, and you should make certain that you have a comprehensive budget to match it up against and to ensure that you are not putting yourself in a financially insecure position. So again, this is different for every person. It's based on so many circumstances, but it's worth thinking through. What is the minimum that you will be willing to accept for a position and to make that change in your career? For every person, this is different, but it's worth thinking about and knowing where your answer lies. It should be informed by creating a budget. Knowing your personal budget can help you prepare to negotiate and confirm if your target salary is appropriate. It's also a good idea to estimate your monthly take-home and pay after taxes and other deductions. I wish I would have done this. The first job offer that I was given, I took that salary, divided it by 52, and I thought, okay, I can barely make this work, but I'll make it work. What I did not factor in was the taxes that would be taken out. And that was a huge, quite severe shock when I received my first paycheck and saw FICA and so many other things taken out. But there are resources in this workbook, websites and budget planning that help you be informed what taxes might be taken out. Or if you haven't put together a budget for yourself, what are some beginning steps to consider? How much will you spend on transportation, on healthcare, on food, all your living expenses, all of these other pieces? And this is a very individualized thing, so we aren't going to take a lot of time today to do this. But it's important to know those numbers for your own self. That helps to inform all of your planning and financial goals that you have. whether it's to buy a new instrument or take a vacation or to save for a home or another big purchase that you may have. We all have financial goals and likely would probably want to retire someday as well and enjoy that. So knowing your financial planning today will only help inform you in the financial decisions that you will be making in the future. Remember, set your salary targets based on objective data. Your budget can inform those goals, but it should not be a reason to increase your target salary outside of a range that you can objectively justify. Which means if your budget says that you need to earn X amount of money, but a position is only being offered and it's $10,000 less, you can't expect that company or that organization to increase what they have budgeted for that role just because you would like to be earning that to cover everything that you need. But on the other hand, having a budget below your targeted salary doesn't mean that you should decrease what you are willing to accept. So it's important to know those numbers. And what also informs those numbers are the value of the benefits. Oftentimes these are not considered as seriously as the hard number. And I can understand those reasons why, but all of these things and more, all of these things that are listed on the screen in front of you, the benefits have hard value to them. You know, family and medical leave, flex time, health insurance, is that covered, is that not covered? Funds for professional development, you know, maybe you are wanting to take a job and they're short like $3,000, but you're able to negotiate $3,000 into professional development funds for you to travel and go to a conference or two, or maybe take a class every year. That's an amazing value, you know. Retirement and investment plans, that's another huge piece if an employer has matching funds for you. All of these. Certain benefits like health insurance or vacation are usually standard for all employees, but some can be negotiated. Rather than ask for more of everything, I would encourage you to focus on what is important to you right now. Give your benefits the same objective analysis as your salary. Ask which benefits are typically offered, and if possible, talk to people who work at the company where you are interviewing. Ask them what benefits they have, or consider what's valuable to you and whether you should negotiate for anything other than your salary. So after this webinar, when you're at home, or wherever you are right now in the social distancing era, use all of these steps that we just learned to research and benchmark your salary and benefits for the specific job title and location. And do your research as you prepare your pitch. If you have questions, feel free to write them into the Q&A. But I'm going to go on to the third step in knowing your strategy. Up to this point, we have discussed tactics to be data-driven and to be highly objective during your interview and your negotiations. For the rest of this workshop, we are going to focus on ways to become strategic and persuasive. The first thing to note in knowing your strategy is that the negotiation should not start until an offer has been made. You can do all of your background research, including talking to HR, talking to other colleagues in the company, talking to other colleagues in the field, talking to career services, right? You do all of this research. That's great, and you should do that. but the negotiation does not start until after an offer has been made. Here's a few tips for when you enter your negotiation. Oftentimes these happen over the phone, not always, but many times. Bring your notes to the negotiation, whether it's on the phone or in person. And by your notes, this could be everything from your strategy to your value statements to reflections that you had and questions, outstanding questions that you may still have. Have those in front of you. It's okay to do that. I've taken the lessons from this negotiation workshop and actually applied it to some difficult conversations at past jobs that I've had. One of them was taking my notes into difficult conversations. And I really was thankful that I had it there. It shows the time and the care and the effort that you have put into thinking about this conversation. When you are entering the negotiation, always remain positive, remain flexible. It's not a battle, it's just a conversation, right? And don't get personal. A quick story. I was working with a colleague and being a reference or being a sounding board as she prepared strategies for her negotiation. She was absolutely qualified, but the position was a bit lower than what she had anticipated. And so she was going to do this via email and wrote this message back saying she had to move across the country and sell her car and her husband would be without a job. And all of these points, which were incredibly valid, but all of those points were for her own personal budget. They had nothing to do with the value that she would bring to the organization. And when you think about entering your negotiation, you absolutely want to go back to those value statements that you created for yourself that helped you get that job offer. Those are the pieces that you want to remind your future employer about as to why they hired you and why they may be able to offer more for compensation. You'll want to anticipate your employer's actions or reactions rather and responses. And that comes into play in the role play, part 4, being able to anticipate the reactions and responses will help you then prepare for how to respond to that response, right? And when you are offered this position, it's important to remind yourself that the employer has picked you. They want to make it work with you. They've already lost out on time and on productivity, and they don't want to have to go through this process that may take a month or 2 months. You know, they want to get someone in to keep moving on and to keep the work getting done. Now, there are typically several conversations before concluding the negotiation, as each side, both you and the employer, considers the requests, whether it's offers or counter offers that are going back and forth. When I was in a position of hiring in a previous job, you know, I had a conversation with the candidate, and then I had to go back and have a conversation with my supervisor. And then I went back and had another conversation with the candidate, and then one more with my supervisor. So I was having many conversations. These typically happen over the span of a day, 2, 3 days, you know, because once that offer is made, you'll want to move quickly. But it's appropriate to ask for the time and space that you need to be able to really evaluate what is being offered. So if you get to a point at which you feel like you need time on your own to consider an offer, you should always feel free to ask for it. One of the things that I have always done and would recommend to you as well is when you get that job offer, that phone call, of course, say thank you so much. I'm so excited. Hear what they have to say. And then instead of giving an immediate response, ask, would you be able to send this to me in writing both the offer and all of the benefits so that I can review it? And can we set a time to talk tomorrow or in 2 days or on Monday if it's over the weekend? Asking for that time and space gives you the ability to plan for your strategy as to what's important, what you'll negotiate for, and prepare your own notes to feel confident walking into that conversation. In the application stage and during an interview, you may be asked about your salary history or salary expectations. I would encourage you to use deflection techniques to avoid answering those questions until you have an offer in hand. Researchers have found that salary history question in the hiring process is one of the most pervasive reasons that the gender pay gap still exists. Some cities and states now prohibit employers from asking for salary history. Make certain to research the laws in your area and know your rights. You can find more information about pay equity laws by state on the AAUW website. So in online applications, when an employer may ask for your salary or what your desired salary is, you can try to leave it blank. That may or may not work. You can write in 0, you can write in NA, or if the field requires a figure, do your research and input your target salary or target salary range. When you are asked this question, what are your salary expectations? Try to get the employer to share their target range first. Now, again, I don't have the workbook pulled up in front of me right now, but there is a whole page of language of what you may say. So instead of, if you were asked this in a conversation, what are your salary expectations? Responses could be, I'd like to first learn more about the responsibilities of this position before I commit to what my salary expectations would be for this position. So again, that is deflecting, that's putting it back on the organization, because the organization does have a budgeted range for that position. And more companies and states are looking towards laws that make sharing those ranges transparent for everyone. This question, can you please tell me your salary history? This is illegal in many states. It's illegal in New York State as of January 4th this year. And be prepared with a response if someone was to ask your salary history. One response could be, this position is a step up in my career, and I'm more interested in knowing what the salary range for this position will be rather than going through my past salary history. So again, looking at the pages in your workbook that have these sentences, find what resonates with you, find what you feel comfortable and have practice saying. And if need be, have it written down in your notes so that if you are surprised with a question like this in an interview or in a negotiation, you can flip to that page and without thinking, just read that statement and be prepared. This question, I need to know what salary you want in order to make you an offer. I disagree with this statement so much because every organization has a budget for what they will pay their employees. So again, being prepared with how you will answer. For instance, I'd first like to know what your philosophy of compensation is for the organization before I share what type of compensation I am looking for. In all of those responses, it's turning it back on the employer to try to have a more productive and transparent conversation about the compensation ranges. Now, just a side note, when in future you are in the role of hiring people, I believe this salary negotiation information is a benefit to you, both as an employee negotiating, but it's also a benefit to you as an employer to really think about the way that you promote transparent and equitable hiring and compensation practices in the organization that you work for. That's a whole nother workshop, and there's tons of writing and research on this. But that's one of the added benefits that I hope you as an attendee will take away from this workshop, is that longer term, when you are in the position of actually hiring employees to work with and for you, to think about how you can promote transparent and equitable hiring and compensation practices in your organization. So this slide, deflecting your salary history, this is written in your book. Responses such as, this position is not exactly the same as my last job. I'd like to discuss what my responsibilities would be here and then determine the fair salary for this job, right? The last one is very eloquent as well. My salary history and expectations are in line with my professional achievements and experience and with the requirements of those positions, right? So these are sample sentences for deflecting salary history. Here's a slide that shares deflecting salary expectations. So if an employer asks you about your salary expectations, I'd like to see if I'm a good fit before we discuss salary. It's very short, sweet, and to the point, I'd like to learn more about the role first. Great. I'd appreciate it if you made me an offer based on what is budgeted for the role, and then we can go from there. So again, all of these are very direct, and they open up, hopefully, a transparent conversation about what may be possible for you. So if you get an offer at or above your target salary, great. Review the compensation package and decide whether or not you want to negotiate further, or perhaps focus on the benefits. Usually you will want to negotiate, it's expected, but make sure that you can clearly spell out the value that you are bringing in. Go back to that step one. Those are pieces of language that you have used all throughout the interview process. What are the most salient points that you can bring in, especially if you get an offer at or above your target salary, to justify why you would ask for increased compensation? If you get an offer below your target salary, you should definitely attempt to negotiate. Also consider what benefits may bridge the gap and make the offer more acceptable. If you cannot negotiate above your walkaway point, you might need to consider whether this job is a good fit for you. Now, I'll take a pause here and say that this is something we will come back to in about 10 minutes time with our panelists, because right now during COVID-19, jobs are few and far between at the moment. And I'm certain all of you have been watching the unemployment numbers in our country right now. It's a very difficult time, especially to be graduating and walking into a new career, or maybe you have lost your job, or that may be a reality for you in the future, in the near future, because of the economic impacts of what's going on. So we'll talk more about that later, especially as it relates to negotiating in different fields. In a normal circumstance though, knowing your target salary, your range, and your walkaway point are pieces that will help strengthen your response to the job offer. And when you get to that point, you will want to respond persuasively. If the employer says, I don't have the budget for this high of a salary, here's some sample language for you. Would you be open to discussing an increase for me next year? Again, this language is all in your workbook. It's important to respond persuasively. before ending a negotiation, you should anticipate at least 3 to 5 different ways that the HR representative or hiring manager might respond to your requests. 3 to 5 ways. That seems like a lot, but that will help with your preparation. And that will help you be ready to respond in ways that may overcome their objections or help them increase the compensation and benefits package slightly. Here are, there we go, a couple other suggestions that employers may respond with. In the future, you'll have opportunities for growth. That's fantastic, but because this number is a little lower, I'd love to discuss my opportunities for the future. I know that one of the most important things in this role is blank. If I'm able to deliver, would you be open to raising my compensation then? Now, I would encourage you from personal experience and past positions to make certain, if you negotiate something like that, to have it clearly spelled out in your offer letter. Make certain that what is stated is what you have agreed to and what makes sense. If it's different than what you understand, take the time to clarify that before signing that letter. And if employer says, wait until next year, you know, maybe this is for a raise or a promotion, you can say, thanks for your support. I do want to continue to align my values with the needs of this organization. Can we check in again in 4 to 6 months? You know, and even though the employer says wait until next year, checking in 4 to 6 months will give you the opportunity to still keep documenting all of the work and contributions that you have made and continue to be in a proactive role of talking about the skills that you bring to the organization. Now, as we talked about before, benefits are also a piece of what to consider in the negotiation. There are some things that you may be able to negotiate, other things are standard. Negotiating benefits is one approach for making a low salary offer more acceptable. It's also a way to maximize your value during the negotiation. And when you are negotiating for a raise or a promotion, we didn't cover that necessarily in this workshop. This, again, was a Start Smart workshop, and so we're looking at that first job out of college. But when you are in a position to negotiate for a raise or a promotion, you can also negotiate for better benefits. You know, maybe it's tuition reimbursement or professional development, or I think what COVID-19 has demonstrated to all of us is that working from home is a viable and possible option in certain circumstances, you know. So there are a list of benefits. I believe it's on page 15 and 16 of your workbook. You can refer to those for further consideration as you develop your own strategies. And then make certain to get it in writing. Yes, you'll have a verbal acceptance of the offer as you conclude the negotiation, but be certain to read it carefully before signing, as I said before, and make certain everything that you discussed is included. That is the only document that will hold up and that you will be able to refer to in the future. So it's incredibly important to make certain everything is articulated the way that you understood it in the negotiation before you sign that document. So the last piece is what the life cycle of a negotiation looks like. To me, this just reminds us that negotiations never end. And it's so easy to get wrapped up and stressed out and anxious about having the right negotiation experience. The best that any of us can do is continue to learn. You know, do the best that you can in this negotiation and understand there will be future ones that will come. You'll learn lessons from your own past experiences. You'll learn lessons from other colleagues. I certainly have and continue to as well, especially in leading these workshops and hearing stories from other participants as to what they have gone through and what they have learned. So this is all just to say you will have many opportunities throughout the course of your career to practice effective negotiation skills. What's most important, however, is that you are your own advocate. Know the value that you bring to an organization and figure out the ways that you are comfortable and confident talking about that, so that as you go through the interview process and are doing the research for the value and what you are worth, you are then able to put all of that together to employ in successful negotiation strategies. Now, the last piece of this workshop typically is a practice session where we would break everyone together and practice negotiating together. I'm going to stop my screen share for a moment and instead say that we are not going to have this breakout session today for obvious reasons. We all are online on this Zoom webinar, and instead of having the practice session, which I do encourage you to do, and there is information in your workbook for how to role play both the employee and the employer. Take that, practice it with your family, with your friends, with your colleagues, or message me. I'd be happy to do a role play with you on Zoom over the course of the summer as you're preparing. We decided not to do this role play today because of everything that's going on with COVID-19 and the unique time period that we are in. So we've decided to take this last half hour to have an open Q&A for you. What is on your mind? What questions do you have? Are they industry specific? Or are they for everyone? That's fine. Type them in the chat Q&A. I will help monitor it. But there are colleagues that I would like to introduce. And if they would like to, I'm going to unpin my video. If they would like to show their videos as well. Jodyi Bazan is Executive Director of the Bennett Career Management Center at the Simon Business School. Jodyi has 20 plus years in finance in roles spanning assistant vice president, chief operating officers, and she's also been a hiring manager, conducted recruitment for her teams and has planned budgets. So today she will be speaking and answering questions to salary development and negotiations in the corporate setting. Catherine Farout has an MA and MFA. She's the assistant director at the Susan B. Anthony Center, where she researches and writes about pay inequities based on gender and race. So she is here to answer any questions that you may have about that area of topic. Wendi Heinzelman is Dean of the Hajim School of Engineering and Applied Sciences. Dean Heinzelman can speak about academic careers as well as the engineering industry. Jodyi Wren is Director of Advising and Career Communities at the Greene Center for Career Education and Connections. Jodyi has been working in career education for nearly 15 years and broadly supporting all industries for undergraduate and graduate students at the college. And then I myself, I've told you before, I'm an Eastman alum. And I've worked running orchestras and helping administrating at music schools and now work as a faculty member, but I'm here to represent and respond to questions around the broader music and arts field, and will also help facilitate the Q&A today. So thank you to my colleagues at University of Rochester for being here and being on the panel today. For those of you participating, feel free to type your questions in. And I'm going to start this first one, directing it to Jodyi. Jodyi, how long would be a good time frame to be working at a company before you ask for a raise?
Sure, thanks for the question. So typically it's usually within a year, but again, this can be something that you negotiate, like Rachel talked talked about. So if it doesn't match if they're not able to match your salary negotiations, you can build that in. So you can actually ask, can we discuss my salary at a 3-month mark, 6-month mark, 9-month mark, year mark? So there really is no hard and fast rule to that. I will say that most companies have it on a yearly performance evaluation and performance review.
Thanks, Jodyi.
Sure.
Okay, feel free to type in your questions. And in the meantime, I have a question for all the panelists. In the era of COVID-19 and social distancing, what is top of mind for you when you are advising students for how to prepare for negotiations?
Okay, that's a tough one. But something that we at the Simon School for our MS and MBA students have been doing. And I think the key to remember is there is still an open job market. People are still getting offers. And companies will, as they open up, begin to hire. So we had a very strong economy before COVID. That's the key to remember, because companies still have money. Don't lower your expectations. To Rachel's point, if you are negotiating with a company in this time frame, they still have a budget and they had an annual number that they put out there. So don't list any specific numbers. Say to them, I would like to be within the standard range. Ask them what their range is, but definitely do your research. And if you feel it's too low for that position, your skills, and that location, and you can do your research on these, then go back. Definitely do not be afraid to say, I have found through my research that the standard rate is, I would like to at least have a starting salary of that. So don't let COVID really put you back in that process, because to Rachel's point, the starting salary that you start at for your first job is your baseline. So you want to make sure that you negotiate based on your qualifications and your skill set.
Yeah, I think what I would add to that, I definitely agree with Julie. I think what I would add to that is that it's important to look at your own circumstances as you're making these decisions. And so I think really reflecting on what's going to work for you now, and remembering that we do believe that the economy will pick up. It is just a job and staying at a job for a year to 2 years is not uncommon. As Rachel talked about, it's becoming less common, sometimes illegal, to ask what your last salary range was. And so there's definitely more movement and more opportunity for movement within salary if you shift jobs. And I think as we all hope the economy will pick up once a vaccine happens, definitely in particular once a vaccine happens, there will definitely be more opportunities for movement. So definitely pay attention to your personal circumstances, because that definitely has to play into this as well.
I would also just add, thinking about sort of the industries that are, not all industries are experiencing the downturn in the economy. And so there are actually a number of industries, especially in my field in the engineering area, where they are actually hiring, and they're doing a lot of hiring. And so I think it's important to think about what is going to be maybe how you might pivot some of your searches so that you can target those areas that really are still hiring, and that haven't experienced the same downturn as other areas.
That's a really good point, Wendi. I think looking at, and so in our office, we have a resource, Handshake, who is our technology partner, has been really active in this space. And so they have a blog that all of you have access to that shows the top 500 companies that are currently hiring. And so being active in spaces that showcase this, I think, is important as well. So higher ed technology is one that's hiring. Engineering, computer science, those fields are continuing to hire. Healthcare, in certain aspects of it, are continuing to hire. So really, really great point.
One question that just came in. Do you have advice for international students when navigating the salary negotiation and benefits such as visa sponsoring?
Julie, do you want me to take that, or would you like to take that?
You can go ahead, and I'm, that's a tough one, so go ahead.
No, I think the reality is with whether you're an international student or a domestic student, you still have value. And so understanding what your value is in the marketplace is really important. So I think going through that same exact process is really important. But I also think understanding what your visa, what the visa requirements are. So what OPT is, what your STEM extension, and having a thorough understanding of that. So working closely with ISO is going to be really important there. And so that you're helping educate the employer on what the opportunity is and the role that you can play in that, because sometimes there's a misunderstanding from the employer's perspective on what STEM is and what OPT is. And so if you can bring to them what your value is and how you can make that happen, I think alleviates some of the stress that the employer might have. But as for whether or not you should negotiate, I would say that the same rules apply whether you're a domestic candidate or an international candidate.
And I would agree with Jodyi, absolutely. I would also just add that for most companies that offer sponsorship, that is an offering that is available to every employee that may need it, that qualifies. So it is not necessarily a negotiation point. So do not include that when you're negotiating for your salary, because you are then should be considered as any other employee, and you should have the same standard salary range for that role. So yes, to Jodyi's point, don't negate anything. You bring value, whether you're international or domestic. And if you are working or if you are applying to a company that does typically offer sponsorship, they typically will not put that as part of your negotiation package. So you can negotiate your salary and your benefits based off of the standard rate.
Another question that came in, Dean Heinzelman, maybe you could speak to this one. For entry-level jobs, which require years of experience, how can you incorporate graduate lab research as experience?
Yeah, so I think absolutely graduate research experience is completely valid to count as years of experience. As a researcher, you are essentially working pretty much on your own with guidance from your advisor, and having that independent experience, which is what they're looking for when they ask for years of experience. Now, I guess the question might be, how many years do you count? Because sort of the first year you tend to be taking classes. So when you really start your independent research is what I would suggest counting as your years of experience towards the job. But I think that, it's certainly having experience as a lab researcher is something that you should highlight, that you should talk about. You should be able to figure out how those skills are going to benefit the position that you're going to. So if you think about what research gives you, it gives you the opportunity to think creatively, to do analysis of problems and of solutions. It gives you the opportunity to find new problems. And that's really what research is taking the state of the art and figuring out how do you move that knowledge base forward. And so those are really valuable skills. And so understanding the skills that you have earned through doing lab research is important, because then you can talk about those and make sure that some companies may not recognize the value or understand the value. So it is your job to translate what you have learned and what skills you have gained through doing that lab research into how you can be valuable to that company and how those skills will help you in the position that you're applying for.
Thank you. Catherine, I'm wondering if you might be able to share more research or resources as to where students could go to learn more about laws and gender wage equity and what's happening in that field as it relates to hiring practices right now. I think you're on mute as well. There you go. Try it again.
All right. Take two. There's a national organization on pay equity, which you can Google, which has some great statistics. You can also just Google pay equity and you will get some excellent information. The AAUW website is also a really fantastic resource for that information. But I think what I really want to emphasize, rather than go into numbers and say these are the numbers that show an aggregate of the pay gap that affects women, that affects people of color, that especially affects women of color, that it's really important, I think, psychologically to say those are aggregate numbers and I'm going in to negotiate the very best salary for myself. And that's where that awareness is really important and key. The other thing that I think is important to know is that these numbers are shifting. So, for example, the pay gap for women on average of all races in the US is about 20% what men make. But for women who are just graduating from college, that is about a 10% pay gap. So you're already in a better place. But what I really want to emphasize is the way that pay gap can accumulate. So it's really important to have as much awareness as you can gain about what your colleagues are earning to see if there are any pay gaps. And towards that end, there are some companies, who are doing some interesting experiments in transparency and or trying to look at all their pay data and address any inequities that they have. So if you're looking for company culture and you want to see if they are actively trying to address the pay gap, whether you are a woman, a person of color, or a woman of color, then you can read about that and you can look up certain things about that company's culture to see if they're how that works. And then the other thing you can do is you can try to contact people who are working at those organizations and get a sense. However, I will say that company transparency about pay is a massive minority. It's a very tiny number of companies who are being transparent in their wages. They're kind of at the forefront and really at the vanguard of a movement that has not gained a lot of traction. So don't expect that as a norm is what I would suggest. Finally, I would say one of the things that countries who are working very, very hard to address the pay gap have found is that there seems to be a 10% gender pay gap that they're finding really very difficult to shift. Some of that has to do with the fact that fields that women go into tend to be paid less than men. And some of that has to do with the exclusion of women in some fields that are currently very high paying. You can see that in some of the tech industries, for example. So considerations about field are something to think about. But when researchers go into the numbers on a really close basis and they try to eliminate pay differentials based on education, pay differentials based on field, etc., they really find a significant percentage that can only be attributed to some kind of prejudice. And that is where I think it's important to be informed and to be as proactive as possible.
Thank you. I'll just take a moment and offer to all of our attendees, please feel free to type in any last questions that you have in these remaining minutes. And while you are typing your questions in, another question for all the panelists. Hopefully this one isn't too hard, but who knows? I'm curious, as you know, we've gone through this workshop today, what is one step that you would recommend all participants, all students, what could they do for themselves tomorrow to begin thinking and preparing? Today was the workshop. What can they begin doing tomorrow, especially in the climate of COVID-19?
I'll go with a very basic one. I would really encourage people to look at their resumes and their CVs based on the AAU information on how to quantify your worth, and also to make plans to have someone go over that CV with you, a professional, a colleague, a friend, a mentor.
It's hard to know who's going next, so I apologize if I jumped in there ahead of someone.
Sorry, I should direct you all. I forget that.
Yeah, no, it's okay. It's all right. So my head is spinning because I think there's a lot of really good things, but I'll keep it with COVID because I think, there's a lot of, there may be missed opportunities. And so I think right now is an opportunity to keep trying things out. So even if they're not structured opportunities, to keep enhancing your value, right? Because I think as you think about negotiating, one thing is how do you quantify what your value is? And in the space of COVID, that can be hard, especially if you're graduating or if your internship or your summer plans maybe were altered. And so I think, this is the time to just keep trying. And they don't need to be structured. So this could be working on a independent project. This could be skills-based, non-credit bearing courses. This could be taking a summer course. This could be working on a design challenge. This could be doing a hackathon or a competition. There's lots of things. We actually just launched a college-wide initiative that's on rochester.edu/summer that has a lot of these different things in there. That I think are really critical as you think about what we're talking about, which is making sure that you're able to articulate what your value is. And in the space of COVID, it's creating value for yourself. And so that's something that I would suggest.
I would agree with Jody. You have to be able to create and know your value. But I would say whether it's COVID or any other time, the important thing is to make sure, as Rachel said, you know what your value is. And that's being prepared when you go into the job interview and knowing, okay, given my education, given my experience, given what I've done through my experiences, and being able to transfer your skill set. We talk about it all the time in the Bennett Center. There are a lot of transferable skills, and you need to be able to transfer those skills that you have into the position that you're interviewing for, because that is how you increase your value. You have a lot of skills that may not match the job description exactly, and they never will. But that doesn't mean you don't have those skills. So you have to be able to transfer those. And always remember, know your worth. And in the Q&A, I had put 2 resources that I use with my students, ONET and the Occupational Handbook, that will show you can go in and look at I mentioned standard ranges for jobs, and you can look at those based on location. They're all for positions based in the United States, but it's a great reference point because you can go in and see the difference between Rochester, New York City, and Boston if you're interested in finance, because of course you also have to know what the difference is in terms of where you're going to live and incorporate all of that into your worth, right? So I would just say be prepared regardless of COVID or normal times, if we get back to those. You are the only one that will advocate for yourself, so you have to be able to do that.
Yeah, and I'll just echo what everyone was saying here. I think it's an opportunity now. We actually have more time and space to explore different options that sometimes with our hectic lives, we don't have the time to do that. So I do think it's an opportunity to figure out what it is that you want, figure out how you can match what it is you want to what's available now. And there's a lot of great resources that Rachel has given and that are in the chat window and in the Q&A to go out and figure out what are the opportunities and what are the salary expectations for different areas. All of that information is out there, and just spending the time to go through it and understand what it is you want and trying to align what it is you want from what's available.
Great.
Rachel, can I'm sorry, can I add one more thing? Because you touched upon it, but it is so important for students. You have to practice, because negotiation does not come easy, even to those of us who have been in the industry and have gone through negotiations before. Practice, practice, practice. No joke. Grab a friend, a family, a relative, and be able to confidently and concisely give your pitch as to why you deserve a raise, and that will help you. So I just wanted to throw that out there, because you can never have enough practice, even when you've been in industry for 10, 15, 20 years. So.
Thanks, Julie. That's actually what I was going to say. So I really appreciate having you underscore it, and it's not just me saying you have to practice, but absolutely. Thank you all, first and foremost. Julie, Catherine, Dean Heinzelman, Jodyi, thank all of you for helping to support this and put this workshop together today. Thank all of you, to the attendees, for being here, for participating online and sharing a good chunk of your Friday afternoon when the sun's actually out in Rochester, and I'm certain we would want to be outside, you know, basking in that sun and not the snow that was only here last week. So thank you for sharing your time. I hope this is beneficial to you. I hope this has given you tools and more directions for where you can take this and where you can continue to, you know, grow your own knowledge and comfort with negotiations and communications. And as was underscored, take the time to practice. If you don't have a practice partner, I'm really not joking. Find my email, email me. You can email any one of us. I'm certain we would be more than happy to speak with you and to be a resource and a practice partner for negotiations. But there is a ton of information in that PDF workbook. Please take it, go through all of those links. Don't hesitate to contact any one of us if you have questions, if you're looking for more resources. And thank you all for sharing your time. Have a great weekend.